All right, welcome to RhapsodyCast, episode 5. I'm Matthew.
And I'm Nate.
And you might notice that we sound a little bit better than last week.
Matt.
On top of sounding better last week because we had better music.
Matt.
What?
You sound better.
Thank you.
You sound a lot better.
I was previously recording on a very, very crappy mic, and am now recording on one of the best mics in existence.
Because that's not true at all.
I like to waste my money. No, but it is for a general consumer product.
Yeah,
one of the best options. I'm not a studio over here. I have very, very strict limits on my money.
Yeah,
that's not true.
That's not true.
I
have strict limits on my money,
and I make terrible life decisions.
Getting a better, sounding better for something you want to do isn't a bad decision.
Sure. So we're trying to do this better. So we're on better mics. Well, I'm on a better mic. Nate's using better recording software. We're trying to make this the best podcast we can do.
I think we're doing pretty good right now.
We're steadily increasing it every episode. We'll eventually hit a plateau, and it'll be a plateau where it's great and everyone's happy. I hope. I usually ask you what you did this week. I'm gonna try something a little bit different because we're trying to make this a better podcast, right?
Right.
So I'm gonna ask you what inspired your story this week, Nate.
My story was inspired by my crappy life.
Aw, that's depressing.
No, I've just been working too much, so that's kind of where it all stemmed out of. But then I throw in a bunch of elements that I don't know. You'll see. But yeah, definitely it's based on my life.
That's cool. Mine stems from whenever I do a story, I have to research.
Yes.
I think it's the writer in me. I've read a bunch of books on writing, and it's always all like as much time as you spend writing, you spend easily as much researching, and I've found that very true in a lot of these stories. Because I'll research dumb things to be like, is this right? How does this plant grow on a tree?
Yeah.
And weird things like that, because I don't want to be wrong. I hate being wrong about things that are easily fixable.
Well, with the internet the way it is.
Yeah, it's made everything, really close and easy to access.
I actually did look up something for my story.
What's that?
I looked up names of tree things.
Nice. Like treants or sprites, or I'll just let the story unfold before me.
I literally used it for one sentence, and that was all of my lookup time. Everything else was just off the top of my head.
Nice. I spent
I roll.
A lot more time looking things up, because I want to know the difference between a bog, a swamp, a marsh.
Those are synonyms.
No, they are not. And that is the difference.
All right, fine, whatever.
No, and then I did a lot of physical research in books because those exist.
Whoa.
My girlfriend Amy has a bunch of books on fairies and things, and I spent a lot of time paging through those.
Oh man, so I didn't do any research on fairies.
Yeah, I did a lot of that. Not as much as I wanted to, because I don't know. I felt really rushed on this because there's so much I wanted to tell, and I ended up writing. This is by far my longest story yet.
Cool.
And I wish I had more time to research, but I didn't manage my time as well this week, so I didn't research as much. But it's it's gonna be fun.
Cool.
And I hope it starts off and it ends a little cliched or rushed, and I hope that the middle part makes up for that.
Well, we'll just have to wait and find out.
Yeah, we will. So with that, let's get into these stories.
The title of my story this week is Fairies Booler's Day Off.
Nice.
Just outside a small barbarian encampment lived a thriving fairy village in and on a massive oak tree. Geronimo Nix slammed his hammer over an anvil, helping to craft a new blade. Again and again he struck it with a bored look in his eye. He let out a sigh, thinking of the time he'd wasted forging weapons and armor every day for the fairy army. Fairies will never be in a war, he thought. Fairies in the land of Tarantinia were never taken seriously. Some people wouldn't even acknowledge their existence, for fairies in this realm were small. Only a few keen wizards had laid eyes on them, and that was with the help of a magical eye magnification spell. To most common folks, fairies are a small nuisance that are no different than a standard fly. If a large group of fairies gathered, they would commonly be mistaken for moss growing on a stone or tree thanks to the overabundance of green in their clothing fairies wear. Geronimo pondered this while slamming his hammer down. He and his blacksmith master had been stockpiling weapons for some undetermined war, probably with ants, he thought. He was overworked and underpaid, as most people his young age felt. However, in this case, it was the G-danged truth. This was his 21st day in a row without a break. All he wanted was some time to himself. As he clanked his hammer yet again, his fairy school friend drove up to his workshop. It was Fairies Booler, and he was driving the slickest, baddest, raddest, most gnarly Enchanticraft Geronimo had ever seen. It was a candy red paint job with triple spoilers, hover capabilities, and an engine that roared like a woolgon. Hey Geronimo, let's go for a ride. Ditch your job, dude, Ferris said, chugging a beer. I can't, Ferris, Geronimo sighed. If I leave now, I won't get paid, and I might even get fired, and I can't afford to lose a day or not have a job at all. Stop having a boring life, nerd. Your job is pointless anyway. Come on, live a little, Booler nagged. Geronimo started weighing his options. He could stay at his work, building more weapons for an imaginary war, or he could blow off his responsibilities for one day and probably wouldn't lose his job over it. Alright, fine, but you better make this worth it. Geronimo hopped into the craft and Booler turned his radio all the way up, creating a cacophony of tunage for the whole village to hear. Booler sped through the roads created by the natural occurring grooves between the bark and the tree. As he made his way towards the crown of the tree, he took a hard left onto a branch. He passed a sign in the road that read, "Branch out, detour." They continued down the road since Booler was too cool to obey road signs. Hey Booler, shouldn't we turn back? Geronimo warned, but Booler laughed in his face. The signs on the road began to increase as they spread faster and faster down the branch. Branch out, turn back. Branch out, stop now. Warning, death ahead. I feel like you've been warned enough. I wouldn't even care if you died. Please, turn back. No, really, this isn't funny anymore. Okay, fine, be that way. Have a nice trip, see you next fall. That was a dumb sign. I can't think of anything else to say. This is a really long road for being as dangerous as my boss says it is. I'm tired of making signs. And finally, I quit. Completely out of nowhere and without warning, the road ended and the two fairies flew off the tree, plummeting down to the grasslands below. As they screamed for their lives, Geronimo shouted, "Wait, we are fairies!" They used their wings to fly into the air and landed on a nearby branch, leaving the car to plummet down to the ground and explode. Although from a human perspective, it would have just looked like a little puff of smoke. Aw man, my dad's gonna kill me, Booler fretted. Kill, you say? The two fairies turned around to see a mysterious fairy cloaked in a blood-red robe emerge from a knothole in the tree. Please join us for our service. Holy Rimsa, Booler, we're on the wrong side of the tree, Geronimo said. A gaggle of cloaked fairies seemingly materialized around them. They grabbed the two young fairies, tied them up, and dragged them into the knothole. They were seated in the back row of the cult's service, in the middle of a pew so they couldn't escape. A sea of red cloaks sat in front of them, filling every pew in the auditorium. A huge ferret was tied down on the stage, with many cultists guarding the poor creature. A fairy dressed in a more ornate red robe walked on stage and addressed the crowd. Are you tired of your daily grind? Do you feel like you need something more in your life? He preached. You can't find the answers you're looking for in booze or fast cars. You need to look to Grigmux, the destroyer of worlds. Can I get an amen? A few cultists in the crowd retorted the blessing. Others raised their hands to their lord. Wow, this is all very relevant, Geronimo thought. I am really tired of my daily grind. Maybe I need Lord Gridmux. Geronimo started listening intently to the cultist's words. My friends, we are here today to show our appreciation to Lord Grigmux. He and he alone will show us the way, but you have to accept him into your life. If you are here today and you find that you have a Grigmux-shaped void in your life that needs to be filled, you better pray to Grigmux and ask him to fill it. Geronimo thought to himself, yes, I need to be filled. Geronimo, Buller whispered, we need to get out of here. These people are crazy. Everyone join me in prayer, the leader announced. The congregation began chanting, Our holy Grigmux, please protect our race that we may smite anyone who opposes our way of life. Please bless us to conquer our foes in battle. We ask this so that we may bring honor upon your destructive way of life. Send us a sign. The leader cut the ferret's throat, spilling blood onto the stage. The tree shook. The fairies began to sparkle and change. They began to grow. In fact, all the fairies who inhabited the great oak began to grow. But not only the fairies, but their homes, the trees, their possession, and even their weapons grew along with them. They grew until they were proportional to humans. The nearby barbarian encampment ran towards the huge disturbance, ready to do battle. The priest shouted, Thank you, Dark Lord! Now we know what we must do. I have a key to the weapons cache, Geronimo yelled. The fairies exited the tree and flew over to the blacksmith's shop with Geronimo leading the way. There they met Flixie, the blacksmith master. Geronimo, where have you been? What just happened? Flixie asked in utter confusion. Our hard work has finally paid off, Flixie. We can finally conquer the world with the insane amount of weapons we've been stockpiling, Geronimo explained. Well, I'll be. That's awesome, Flixie responded. They made their way to the weapons cache and started equipping all the fairies in their village. The fairy army met with the barbarians, making quick work of the encampment. Life moves pretty fast, Fairies Buller explained, cleaving a barbarian in half. If you don't stop to look around once in a while, you could miss it. The end.
All right.
That was my dumb story.
Yeah, it's fun. It's great. It was less Ferris Bueller than I was worried about.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love Ferris Bueller.
I don't know why I put him in there. I was just like,
No, it was great. That whole story is fun.
I have no idea what I'm actually doing.
I think that's true of everyone. You could ask Ray Bradbury and J.R. Tolkien. They'd be like, I
don't know.
I put words down. Okay. My story about fairies and a large beast. I don't think you mentioned the proper names, but it's not important, I guess.
That was blacksmith. Fairies and blacksmith.
Is called The Fairy and the Witch.
Very cool.
Not really.
I'm down.
Okay. Besides the world of mortals, there are a number of magically enchanted realms. Though they all weave and interconnect in various different ways, only two worlds connected in a way that allows for two-way travel by non-magical means. There's the infernal Underrealm, the abyssal home to demons and devils from whence the demon king Meshej started his crusade against the gods. Then there's the Overlands, home of the Fae, or Fair Folk. The peaceful denizens of the Overlands enjoyed mirth and merriment. They were an ageless people, forever happy in song, dance, and delight. Their endless enchanted forest always provided everything they needed, and though not unheard of, it was rare that any sprite or pixie, fairy or spirit even dreamed of a life beyond the bliss of the Overlands. It was on one lovely enchanting evening that two small fairies found themselves near a foggy portion of their endless forest. "Can you believe it, Bee?" Lydia and Kala asked, semi-rhetorically. "Sometime soon this portion of the great forest is going to open up and connect with the human world." Lydia and Kala was dressed in a typical fairy fashion, with a large green leaf immodestly covering her. She was about 2 feet tall, with silvery white hair and a very slight frame. Springing from her back were 2 massive butterfly-style wings. They were a light coral pink with white and soft blue accenting. "I'm not sure what's so exciting about that," Betrixel said, genuinely unsure. "Bee," Lydia and Kala started, exasperated. She turned to Betrixel. The other fairy was of a similar build and height. She had long black hair that matched her black wings, which had purple and red highlighting. For clothing, she had pink and white cherry blossom petals bound into a dress with a black blade of grass. "There's a whole world to explore, full of beasties and heroes and magic and secrets. There's far more magic here in this glade than there ever will be in the mortal lands," Betrixel rebutted. "Besides, Elder Aliquin warned us of the dangers of the mortal realm. It isn't safe for fairies to mingle with the humans. Remember the tale of Jalessa and Dairm? Elder Aliquin expresses the fears of the old fae. But she didn't forbid travel to the world of the mortals," Lillian Collis stated. "Besides, that old story's just a myth. There's no such thing as cast iron. It's just an old fae trick to scare the younger fairies from traveling from the forest." "Maybe you're right," Betrixel waned a bit. "And if we see a human," the fairy confidently continued, "we'll just turn invisible. I'm not afraid of some fairy hunter with cast iron weapons or some crazy alchemist who wants to bottle us and use us for some potion. They're all just tall tales, we've been told, to keep us in line." "Maybe you're right, Lydian," the other fairy relented. "But if we go, promise me we'll be back in an hour. I don't want to be stuck on their side." "That's the spirit, Bee," Lydian Kala exclaimed. "Besides, I'm sure an hour will be plenty of time to see everything the mortal realm has to offer." As if responding to her words, the fog thinned a bit, and the 2 fairies peered into a world that was not their own. The 2 realms occupied the same space, and though the Overlands was perpetually evening, and it was daytime on the human world, the doubly occupied space was a murky gloom, a shifty haze between 2 places, though not truly in either. The best friends looked at each other. One's face was excited curiosity, the other mild terror. They both took a deep breath, then, holding hands, flew together into the unknown. They passed through the barrier between worlds quickly and painlessly. No fanfare announced their arrival. The sudden change from one setting to another was, however, a jarring assault to the senses, especially since neither of the fairies had experienced anything but the Overlands, where the realm of the Fae had always had the slight strummings of a harp and the joyous merriment of the fair folk laughing or singing. This place had a cacophony of animal and insect sounds. Croaks and chirps, buzzing and growls all surrounded the 2 visitors. Sounds weren't the only thing that had changed. Everything was different. The fairy world had always had a warmth to it, whereas this swamp was a bit too chilly for the leaf clothing. The sweet smell of honeydew and lilac had been replaced with a bitter musk. Even the trees and the sparse muddy grass of the swamp was less enchanted looking. "Lydian, I'm scared," Betrixel stated sadly. "Don't worry, Bee," she assured. "I'll protect us." Lydian called on her magic, its familiar warmth stealing her nerves in this unfamiliar place. She touched her leaf dress, and in a flourish of whimsical magic it transformed into electrum chainmail, made of the tiniest rings, still in the same shape of the leaf. "Oh geez, Lydian," Betrixel exclaimed. "Are you trying to show your fairy bits to all the humans?" Lydian looked down at her new outfit. Though she could see bits of her skin between some of the rings, she couldn't see anything too private. "Don't be a prude," she said, adding, "We know plenty of fairies who wear more revealing leaves. Now, help me name my sword." With that, she flew to the ground and picked up a fallen tree branch. Her magic flowed from her into the stick, and it too changed into Electrum, transforming into an impossibly sharp, fairy-sized bastard sword. She held it up for inspection. "I don't know." Patrixel moaned it more than she said it. "Bitey?" "Bitey?" Lydian asked mockingly. "No one's going to take a fairy with a sword named Bitey seriously. No, it needs to be cool. Threatening. How about..." She paused. "Gold silver." "Gold silver?" the other fairy chided. "How is that more threatening than Bitey?" Okay, the armed fairy said, brandishing her unnamed sword. "How about Quicksilver?" "Oh, I like that," Patrixel commended. "But there's a problem. The humans already have something called that. It's a sort of liquid metal." "Liquid metal?" Lydian Kala questioned. "That sounds cool." She stared hard at her sword. Then she tapped it on the flat edge. The blade wavered. It bent and melted before their eyes until it was just blobs of silvery gold floating in a line coming from the hilt. They lazily bobbed up and down. When they collided, they would sometimes merge into larger drops of liquid metal, or sometimes bounce off each other. "Pretty," Patrixel commented. "But in that state, it doesn't look like it's fit for cutting water." The lighter colored fairy gave but a thought, and the fluid blade reformed back into a solid one with a dramatic shing. "Impressive," the unarmed fairy said, sounding a bit more cheery. "I feel safer already. So, now what?" Lydia and Kala looked around at the wet greens and browns of the swamp around them. "Well," she said, as she surveyed, "I guess we go looking for an adventure." The two glanced around, unsure how to start. Should they try to locate some of the croaking or chirping creatures? Or maybe fly around and see if everything was this wet and mossy. Where could they go to see a human in its natural environment? The two fairies wondered about this as they hovered just a foot above the wet, muddy ground, thin, beautiful wings effortlessly keeping them aloft. But Trixel gasped and pointed. "What's that?" she cried. Lydian followed the pointed finger with her gaze, but didn't see anything except a big wet log. She glanced around, seeing nothing, then looked back to the log. She noticed this time that it was moving slowly towards them. It continued in their direction, and as it did, Lydia saw that its nostrils flare up as it sniffed the air. She couldn't help but gasp, too, at the sudden realization. Her gaze shifted back past its nostrils until she found the beast's sinister, slit eyes floating just above the murky waters, intently focused on her. This approaching creature was massive, covered in scaly flesh, and had reptilian eyes. Lydia and Kala realized what it was. "Swamp dragon," she decreed. "I'm gonna slay it." As she finished saying it, Quicksilver solidified with a shing. She leaned forward, her wings taking her down and towards her prey. "Lyd, no, don't!" the other fairy called out. "Become invisible!" And with that, the unarmed fairy winked out of view. The other fairy continued charging until she was no more than a foot away from the water creature. Then she menacingly brandished her shining sword. "Swamp dragon," she commanded. "Give me your hoard of gold and I shall consider not slaying you." The massive beast, which was larger from nostril to eye than Lydian was tall, stared back at her, either too stupid or unimpressed to respond. "That was your final warning," she stated flatly before swinging Quicksilver. The sword dipped into one nostril and sliced right through the flesh of the creature as she effortlessly pushed the thin blade in a path through the edge of her foe's nose. The stinging attack enraged the swamp beast, and it lashed out with a speed that was terrifying for something of its size. Lydian reacted with a slow flinch, the maw of her enemy agape as it lunged from the water towards her. Its toothy mouth clamped down on her empty-handed arm, and she experienced a truly new sensation. Pain. She was horrified. She couldn't react. She couldn't even describe the feeling. It was like the opposite of her favorite song and her favorite dance simultaneously, only worse. Her attacker, unlike herself, was not in shock and continued its assault by tilting to one side, trying to draw the fairy into a death spin. Lydia and Kala felt the pressure of her turning foe and snapped back to reality. It seemed she was in an honest do-or-die situation, so she did. Acting entirely on instinct, Lydian used her magic to change her arm into the consistency of taffy. This relieved a lot of the pressure and thus most of the pain. The powerful beast spun and her arm twisted and coiled. It stretched and thinned to accommodate the twirling monster. In another, drier section of the swamp, there was built a small 2-roomed hut with 2 inhabitants. Sylvia the witch stood over a large cauldron filled with a bubbling liquid. Her skin was a dark green from years of living in the algae-rich swamp. She wore a loose-fitting black cotton robe, and her thin black hair was tangled from want of a good brushing. Hovering over the large black pot, Sylvia pinched in dried ingredients, stirring with her massive spoon, sniffed the mixture, then repeated the process. Smop, the witch's apprentice, was staring at her from over a water-damaged book on potions he was pretending to read. Smop was a fairly handsome teenage lad. His skin had a slight green tinting from his years in the swamp. His hair was a shaggy mop of brown on top of his head. He wore a robe fashioned from a large burlap sack, easily fit for 50 pounds of potatoes. On his feet were a pair of homemade wooden sandals tied to him with leather straps. Staring at the witch, he considered how much he disliked the woman. He couldn't deny that she had provided for him for years and taught him many things, like witchcraft and potion brewing. She had, however, also been mean, demanding, and entirely negligent of his feelings and needs. "Boy!" the witch called out suddenly. Smop jumped, fumbling the book around before setting it down and standing up straight. It had been years since she had last used his real name, and he figured she had probably forgotten it by now. "What is it, Mistress Sylvia?" he asked, eager to please. "Boy, I've decided to brew a passion potion. Go fetch me some night thistle." "Yes, mistress," he responded, wincing. Pleasure potion was her code for alone time. He tried not to think about it. He relished time away, anyway. He mussed his hair before turning and walking out of the hut. Sylvia watched him as he did, clutching tight to a broom as he went. The swamp was damp and chilly as he left the small dwelling with the massive boiling cauldron of liquid. Right outside the hut, he turned and pulled the top half of a night thistle stalk. He had planted a bunch of common herbs just outside the hut, so he wouldn't have to go hunting when the witch sent him out. He knew she'd be upset if she found out, but he figured she'd never notice since she almost never left the home. He hadn't missed his guess. He tossed the stalk into a canvas tote he kept hanging on a branch of a nearby tree. Then he slung the bag over his shoulder and continued on into the swamp. Smop journeyed into his swamp home. He passed gnarly stumps and wicked-looking trees. He skirted brown and green water masses, his wooden sandals squishing through the muddy banks. He traveled away from the witch's hovel, musing and daydreaming as he went. After a time, a peculiar sound broke him out of his mental sojourn. He rushed towards it and quickly found himself in a wet clearing. What he saw was far more peculiar than the sound he had heard would have suggested. Erratically floating over a dark pond was the tiniest woman he'd ever seen. She had bright, beautiful wings and wore a strange metal bodice. Her arm had been seized by a swamp crocodile, which had turned and twisted it into a knotty mess. Apparently, this diminutive creature had limbs with the consistency of pasta noodles. The croc was spinning and thrashing, while the little lady flailed and swung a small silvery sword. Lydia Kala was not winning her first combat as a fairy knight. This swamp dragon was fierce. It swung and tugged her about on her taffy arm. She attacked with quicksilver whenever she got a chance, and though it sliced through the creature's tough hide, it had so much flesh she wasn't sure it was phased at all. She swiped and stabbed to little effect, unsure of how long she could continue this battle. It was more tiring than the time she danced through 10 songs in a row. The dragon shook its head, and her arm stretched to its limit. She bounced off his face, flopping to one side, missing an opportunity to take its eye with her. Her wings struggled to keep her aloft as it yanked and pulled her about. There was a loud crash, and she immediately was freed. Unexpectedly released, she quickly flew away, taking a second to right herself, now well above the water. She looked about to figure out what had happened. Standing by the water's edge was a gargantuan, wingless, fairy-like creature with weird brown clothing. In his hand was a large, broken log, and the creature, presumably struck by the massive hunk of wood, seemed to have fled. The large man was staring right at her. Hi, she ventured, hoping he and she spoke a common tongue. Hi, he responded shyly. Are you... He struggled to find words. Are you a swamp sprite? Lydian Kala giggled. No, silly. I'm a fairy. But what are you, a swamp titan? A titan? Me? Ha! No. He laughed to himself at the notion. No, he continued. I'm no titan. Just your regular, normal human. A human, she exclaimed. Are all humans as huge as you? The human boy laughed at the question. I suppose we are. Many are even larger than me. Really, though, I just think you're small. Is your arm okay? Lydian looked down at her arm. It was kinked and coiled and knotted. Oh, yeah, she said as she looked at it. A shiver of magic rushed through her body and into the arm. It spun and flopped and jiggled until it was righted again. There, she stated, flexing her fingers and looking herself over for any lasting damage. Wow, he said, honestly amazed. I'm Smop. What's your name? I'm Lydian, she said. Well, hello, Lydian, he greeted. Welcome to our swamp. A sudden wave of realization washed over his face. Oh no, he said suddenly. I've got to get back. He dropped the log and turned to leave, but paused. He turned back. You want to come with? Oh, yes, I'd like that very much. Lydian Kala, rasped the low voice of the invisible Betrixel. Flying at eye level, Lydian gave a start at the use of her full name. Oh my, she exclaimed, remembering her friend. Will you give me a second? She flew a bit away before he could answer. Bee, she whispered energetically. I met a human, did you see? I did see, Beatrix hissed. Lydian couldn't tell if she was angry or scared or both. Lyd, we need to go back. It's been nearly an hour. We don't know how long the connection will last. Oh, yeah, the connection, Lydian said thoughtfully. I know, she quickly exclaimed. You go back and wait. I'll go with Smop to see his human palace. That way you won't get stuck here, and neither of us will have to worry. But Lydian, the invisible fairy protested. Don't worry, she assured. I'll be back before you know it. And if I somehow don't make it, you'll need to be on the other side to tell Elder Eloquent. Beatrix groaned. Oh, all right. But Lydian, please be careful. And hurry. I will, the visible fairy assured, with a confident smile. The two friends turned and flew away from each other. All right, Lydian said, landing on Smop's shoulder. Let's go. The swamp-dwelling teen wasn't sure why the tiny girl needed to whisper to herself before coming with him to his hut, but he knew better than to question a fairy. Lydian looked down at his sword hilt. The blade had returned to its liquid state after her fight had ended, and now that she was resting a bit, she was unsure of what to do with the hilt when not fighting. She held it near her hip, the fluid blade pointing downward. With a jolt of magic, it flew from her hand and attached itself almost magnetically to her hip. It was pretty impressive the way he defeated that dragon back there. Dragon? He questioned, bemused. Dragon nothing. That was a swamp croc. And I didn't defeat it, I just scared it away. It wasn't a dragon? She asked, a bit crestfallen. Nope, just a crocodile, he told her. A real dragon could eat a guy like me in a single bite. Wow, she said, having trouble imagining something so large. Presently, they came to a small clearing, which contained the witch's herb-surrounded hut. It wasn't quite what Lydian had imagined, owing to the fact that all of her human house knowledge had come from stories of kings and queens. Even still, since fairies didn't need to sleep and rarely kept possessions, Lydian had never seen a house, much less been inside one. Here it is, he presented the swamp hovel with a hand gesture. It's not much, but it's the only home I can remember. Lydian tried to think of a word used to describe houses from the stories she knew. It's decadent. Smop simply smiled. The young man entered the witch's home, Fairy standing on his shoulder. When the two entered, Sylvia was head first in her cauldron, scrubbing it out. I brought you that nightshade, he announced, and I made a friend. You can't have friends, boy, the witch stated, her words amplified in the cauldron. Witches don't have friends. She pushed herself out of the massive cast-iron pot. Fairy! She shrieked. Sylvia whirled around, grabbing the frying pan off of the wood stove, then came back, slinging the pan in a wide arc. Smop ducked. Lydian was less quick to react. The cast-iron cookware battered her into a shelf full of potions. Broken glass and dripping elixirs followed the fairy to the floor. Horrified, the witch's apprentice watched as she dug through a chest, pulling out a jar barely large enough to fit the fairy. As she advanced on the fallen fae, Smop was at a loss for what he should do. Quick as he could, he threw a trip spell her way. A simple hex, the apprentice had little doubt in his mistress's ability to counter it. So focused was she on bottling the fairy, however, that she didn't think to cover her flank. The hex took her by surprise, and she tripped. The witch's head came down hard on the lip of her large cauldron. She collapsed to the ground in a broken heap. Smop gasped, entirely surprised the spell went off, let alone that it would take her out entirely. Her fall was so brutal he wasn't sure if she had survived, and honestly, he didn't care. In a rush, the young witch scooped a few books and a couple of potions into his tote, picked up his fallen companion, and ran out of the witch's hut for the last time. Back in the overlands, Betrixel waited. Before long, the fog began to thicken. The worried fairy fluttered about nervously. The mortal realm became more and more difficult to see. Soon it was gone, and with it her hopes of ever seeing her best friend. The land of the Fae and the fair folk is the land of eternal mirth and happiness. But on that day, one fairy learned to cry. But Trixel, a commanding yet familiar voice, startled the weeping fairy. She turned around in shock and surprise, wiping away the tears that were streaming down her face. "What is the meaning of this?" Elder Eloquent asked. "Oh, Elder," Betrixel sobbed. Then her words poured out in a rush. "Lydia and I went to the human world, and then we looked around, and then she fought a large beast, and then she met a human and left with him, and then I came back, but then the connection went away, and now Lydia is stuck there forever." She started crying again. This is grave news indeed," the elder said, thinking on it. "There is one solution." Betrixel sniffed. "What is it?" Eloquent pointed. "You must go back and return with our wayward sister." "But," the fairy said between sobs, I can't go. The connection's gone." Her face grim, the wise fairy simply said, "There is more than one way to travel to the mortal realm." Smop finally pushed out of the swamp and into a small prairie. He was exhausted, having run the last few hours to get some distance from his old life. He sat down on a stump to catch his breath. "How are you doing?" he asked, panting. Lydian stood on his shoulder. Her right arm was buried in a shaggy mess of hair. Her left was in a sling fashioned from a strip of rawhide. Her left wing was bent at an unnatural angle. "I'm fine, thanks." "Ooh, shooting star," he said suddenly, pointing into the night sky. "Make a wish." "I wish," she wished aloud as she watched the pinprick of light streak across the dark sky, "to make many friends as I adventure to explore my new home." The end.
That's it?
That's
Oh, man!
That's it. It's only like a million words.
Yeah, like, it was super entertaining, though. That was a good one, Matt. You did good.
You enjoyed that?
You did good. I liked it a lot.
It's better than the previous one?
Definitely. I like the characters. I like the setup. I like the weird magic that the fairies have where they're just like, I'm going to make this metal now. Boom.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, they're just like, I don't know. I guess most of it was just they turned one thing into another thing. Like, they didn't create anything or destroy anything. It's like,
right.
But that wasn't like an intentional decision. I wasn't like, they can only affect things. But I mean, if you look at like, what is it, Cinderella? Like, that's what the fairy does.
Right. It's like, yeah. Like, they make the giant pumpkin into a coach.
Yeah. Something like that.
I haven't seen Cinderella in forever, dude.
I've never seen it, so... Well, I might have saw it when I was like 5.
Yeah. It's one of those movies.
Yeah. Classic.
But no. Yeah, I liked your characters, and I thought it was very entertaining.
Well, thanks. I'm glad. That's what I go for. Okay, so those were our stories about fairies. I imagine you noticed because it was kind of awkward there in parts. Nate and I didn't interrupt each other or comment or anything on this episode. I've been talking around. We haven't gotten many comments on like the YouTube or Podomatic or Facebook or anything yet.
Many.
We haven't got
any at all.
Any. But I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that by the time this one comes out, since we record these in advance, that someone has commented. Feel free to comment.
Please.
But I have talked to people, like my coworkers and family listen, and one of my friends said that he enjoyed the stories a lot, but he disliked all the interruptions. He, like me, listens to a lot of audiobooks, and I imagine it's a little unsettling to switch between that and this. So I decided to give it a try, and ask for comments. So, tell us what you prefer between the two styles. I know what we prefer, but it's not all about us. It's we want to be as entertaining for you guys as possible. That's why we increase our technology, increase our quality.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, let us know what you think between the two, and what you think in general about these stories. I guess next week's prompts. It's your turn to choose the shared prompt. What have you thought of?
Well, I want to do something that I love more than probably any fantasies type. Well, not really fantasy because they existed, but you can make it fantasy. But I don't care. Well, I want to do pirates.
Pirates.
I
Oh,
love pirates.
that is unexpected.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm game because pirates are really cool.
You can make them fantasies.
Oh, yeah. Well, then I'm going to totally cheat and use the one that you had said you were probably going to do for the shared prompt, and then give you for your unique prompt dragons.
Oh man, pirates and dragons.
It's
That's
gonna
too awesome.
it's gonna be fantasy as hell, man.
Oh man, that's gonna be cool. I can't wait.
Me either.
And for your shared prompt, or no, your unique prompt. I'm sorry. Because I was looking ahead. This will release on the 4th of July. I'm gonna give you fireworks.
Oh, way to be accurate and prompt or timely.
Well,
That's the one.
Well, it would have been better if I gave you fireworks last week because whatever.
Why?
Because today
Oh,
is the 4th of July.
Today is the 4th of July.
It is.
Okay. Less good, but still interesting.
Whatever, dude.
Well, hey, man, we gotta think. We need to think ahead. We need to get on that. So for next week, I will have a story of pirates and fireworks,
and I will have a story of pirates and dragons.
It's gonna be a good one.
Let's hope.
But yeah, I'm hoping. Fingers crossed, huh?
Hopefully better than this one for me.
Oh, I was gonna say, I thought you liked my story.
No,
I really liked your story. It was fun.
I don't know.
I kind of wish I had commented because there were a lot of things I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, that would have been better.
I'm sorry, but that's our opinion on this particular episode. I mean, there are some that you maybe not want us to interrupt. Let us know.
Also, I gotta mention thanks to Black Bear Combo for letting us use their song for our bumps and intros and exits and whatnot.
It's a great band. It's a great song. You can get them on iTunes. They're on there. So I guess before this gets too long-winded, I'm going to say I hope you have a fantastic week, and let us know. Bye. Pleasure Potion was her code for alone time. He tried not to think about it. He realized... You did not do that laugh.
What?
What?
I laughed once and then they caught me again. Oh, okay, go ahead. Pleasure Potion.
You want me to say that whole line again?
I don't know if I can take it.
Oh, jeez.